Mass shooting in Maine. Oh, they're saying he's FBI? Oh, what else is new? Oh, the mass shooter is FBI and it's a psyop? Yeah, definitely. In a country where mass shootings happen pretty much every single day, it's always a false flag. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. It's basically like saying, if you drive through a red light, there's a likelihood that you might get into a car accident. That's what the average person would understand, and that's what the average person knows that is the likely outcome of that scenario. Except, when that car crash inevitably happens, and it happens every day, dumb motherfuckers still go, that's a psyop. That's a psyop. Yeah, dude, it's a psyop. It's always a false flag, dude. I stepped on a Lego this morning. It must have been a psyop. Or Hamas. Who knows? But now we're going to move on to American news. That's right. 18 have been killed in Maine in a mass shooting rampage. The killer, the mass shooter, is still at large.
Senseless mass shooting after a gunman in Lewiston, Maine, opened fire on a youth night at the town's bowling alley and then in a restaurant.
At least 16 people are dead and dozens more were injured. There is an active manhunt right now for the person of interest. He is considered armed and very dangerous. As we come on the air, the shelter-in-place order has expanded, and people are urged to stay inside and lock their doors. Schools in the area are closed this morning.
The gunman stormed a place where families took their children to have fun. He did not stop there, making his way to a second location, the worst mass shooting of the year. Townspeople hid for their lives. Parents shielded their children. Families fled the scene. Some of them got out to reunite with their loved ones. We will hear from survivors this morning. Our team is tracking the latest developments on this tragedy. We begin with Whit Johnson on the scene in Lewiston, Maine. Good morning, Whit.
George, good morning to you. Sadly, we've become all too familiar with these types of tragedies, and here we are again at the scene of what is expected to be the deadliest shooting so far of 2023. At least 16 people killed, and behind me is that crime scene, the street blocked off. And if you go halfway down the street, that's where the bowling alley is that was hosting a youth night for children. That's where this suspect began his killing spree, and now an entire community on edge as that killer, considered armed and dangerous, is still on the run.
2 active shooter locations, all available units.
This morning, a massive manhunt underway for an armed and dangerous killer after a mass shooting in Maine's second largest city.
We have an active shooter. We have multiple injuries.
The first 911 call coming in around 7 p.m. from a local bowling alley hosting a youth night for kids bowling league. Authorities releasing these surveillance images showing the suspected gunman armed with a rifle where he began his killing spree.
Well, we were inside and it's a normal night of bowling, and out of nowhere he just came in and there was a loud pop. Thought it was a balloon. I had my back turned to the door, and as soon as I turned and saw it was not a balloon, he was holding a weapon, I just booked it down the lane and I slid basically into where the pins are and climbed up in the machine and was on top of the machines for about 10 minutes until the cops got there.
The suspect then traveling about 4 miles to the second shooting scene at a local bar and restaurant.
There are multiple scenes in the city, to include multiple hospitals, a lot of witnesses we're speaking with.
At least 16 people killed and dozens injured.
It's all ages. It was all ages.
Police have identified 40-year-old Robert Card as the person of interest. Sources telling ABC News he has a history of military service and is a firearms instructor, and was treated at a mental health facility over the summer after allegedly...
Nice, man. Yeah, it's just like, it just doesn't matter, right? I mean, this shit happens every fucking day, right? And it must be, of course, as always, it must be a psyop. It must be.
Saying he was hearing voices and threatened to shoot up a National Guard facility in Saco, Maine.
If people see him, they should not approach Card or make contact with him in any way.
Authorities discovering the suspect's white Subaru around 11:30 p.m., 8 miles from the Lewiston crime scenes. The car seen with the door open and lights on. With the suspected killer on the run, the community placed on lockdown, people told to shelter in place. Overnight, we spoke with Megan Hutchinson and her 10-year-old daughter, Zoe, who were at the bowling alley.
When I turned around, I saw the shooter right behind me. He had just come in the door. I don't know if that was just a warning shot or if he actually shot somebody with that one. But between the lanes, there's some swinging doors, like where they keep all the mechanical stuff out back. So we kind of all just ran that way. We barricaded in there, and another parent was in the room with me. She had a phone. She called 911.
Zoe's leg grazed by a bullet. The young girl now unable to comprehend the horrific crime scene she witnessed.
It's just like shocking. Like it's something that you think would never happen. I never thought I'd grow up and get a bullet in my leg. Why? Like, why do people do this? I was more worried about, like, am I gonna live? Am I gonna make it out of here? Like, what's gonna happen? Are the cops gonna come?
Questions no child should ever have to ask. This community here gripped by fear right now. That lockdown is in place in Lewiston and surrounding communities. People told to stay indoors, lock their doors. Businesses and schools are closed as more than 100 investigators comb the area looking for that suspect. We've also learned that President Biden was briefed on that situation overnight. In fact, he was removed from a state dinner with the Australian Prime Minister so that he could get on the phone and make calls to local officials here in Maine.
We're back in it. We're back in it, dude. Yeah, also this dude was a big Cat Turd fan as shown by his Twitter likes. So here's Cat Turd's response. That's cool, man. Yeah, shall not be infringed, as in like this guy who is like literally, even by Republican standards, a guy that shouldn't have a gun. Cat Turd thinks is perfectly valid to keep arming and not taking his guns away. Ay. Okay, I fucking chills, dude. I have chills. So I don't know what to say. Like, I live 30 minutes away. We're sheltering in place and everyone's closed except fucking Trader Joe's, which opened with no regards to their employees' safety. I talked about this before. I tweeted about it earlier this morning as well, where it's like we treat gun violence and mass shootings as a naturally occurring phenomena, okay? And you have to do that. You have to do that because there's just no fucking way. There's no other way to view it because we're not going to get anything done. We're never going to pass legislation, even though gun violence is a perfectly preventable problem, okay? It is a perfectly preventable problem. It's just that Americans believe that the Constitution is our fucking Bible, and they cannot see anything beyond the relatively modern interpretation of the Second Amendment. And it's perfectly tied to the interests of the gun lobby, the gun manufacturers. And it's perfectly tied to Americans utilizing their consumption as their cultural signifier. In this circumstance, their consumption is guns, and becoming single-issue voters that will do everything to ensure that they can continue having their toys. By the way, it's harder to buy Sudafed in Maine than it is to buy an AR-15. Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Well, we're going to continue our coverage of the mass shooting in Maine. We just heard a press conference, and you heard from Vlad a lot of the details that were revealed in that press conference. Robert Card, a 40-year-old man, has gone from a person of interest to a suspect facing murder charges. We know that there were 2 locations that the shootings occurred at, and we got a little more detail about when the shootings happened. The initial 911 calls came in at just 6:56 last night at the Just-in-Time Recreational Center in Lewiston. There, 7 people were killed, 6 men and 1 woman. And then just 7:08, really not long after the first series of 911 calls, another location, a Smenji's, which is, they called it a Smenji's Billiards. It's sort of like a restaurant as well. 8 men killed, 1 inside, and the rest of them one outside rather, and the rest of them inside the facility. 3 other people, several people were transported to hospital, but 3 people died at the hospital, bringing the total number of dead to 18. 13 injured. The police would not talk about the ages. They weren't prepared to give out that information, but they have released information about Robert Card earlier today. A little bit of misinformation about his level of training in terms of firearms. He is not a firearms instructor, but he is part of the Army Reserve, and he's described as a petroleum expert. So our Elaine Keano has been covering this story on the ground for us, and we want to take you there. We also have Charles Marino standing by. He's a former Homeland Security Department advisor and agent. But I'm going to start with you, Elaine. This is something that can rock any community, but particularly in Maine, where they don't have a lot of homicides.
That's exactly right. And I spoke with one resident this morning who basically, when I asked him, have you ever had anything comparable like this happen here? He said, absolutely not. This is just a quiet.
Yeah, no red flag laws. Pretty easy to buy fucking guns. This guy was institutionalized numerous times, it seems. It's great. Cool stuff overall. People like to treat this person like it's an anomaly, but freaks like this are all too common in the state. Everyone knows someone like this in their area who's an arsenal in their closet could snap at any moment, and the state has no protections against people like this owning firearms. Yeah, guns are incredibly easy to acquire. They are readily available, readily accessible. We have no structure that helps people with undergoing severe mental health complications. As conditions worsen and everybody hyper focuses on their toys and the things that they purchase, and that thing being guns, they become more rabid in their defense of maintaining their guns and maintaining their arsenal. And there is no interest at all in moderating any of this, in regulating any of this. So what the fuck do we think is going to happen? What do we think is going to happen? What is slated to happen? Yeah, the guy is a full-blown far-right nutso. Here is his account. Here are all of his likes from his account. CCTV idiots, Elon Musk, fucking Fox News, Kevin McCarthy, cat turd, big cat turd guy. Now, obviously, they wiped it. They wiped all of his accounts, but before they wiped it, you could see his greatest hits. He had a Twitter account. A lot of these guys have Twitter accounts. A lot of these guys get radicalized by watching television. A lot of these guys go crazy, okay? This is not the first time this has happened. It's not even the first time this happened this week. This past week, you saw an Islamophobic hate crime occur in Chicago where a landlord stabbed to death a 6-year-old Palestinian kid. Okay? And stabbed the mother as well. Luckily, she survived, so she could tell the tale. And what we found out from the landlord, who is now in custody, and his family members, is that over the course of many, many years, he has become increasingly radicalized through talk radio for years and years. I have, and many others have, talked about the radicalization that occurs with far-right anti-government extremists, okay? White supremacy is nefarious. It's also incredibly common, and it's not going to go away unless we address at least the underlying material conditions that are causing people to snap, or even address the misinformation campaign that is readily available everywhere you turn on the media. Everyone immediately, before the shit was purged, looked through their Twitter history, even though Elon bleached it. Trump Train, Jim Jordan, Elon Musk, Cat Turd, N Wokeness, McCarthy, Babylon Bee, the who's who of right-wing Christian fascist ideology. Ben Shapiro also makes appearances as well. I don't know if this is him, by the way, the Robert Card, donos, giving money to candidates and stuff. They recorded all of his fucking likes. You can be an anti-government radical without being far-right, yes, but far-right anti-government extremism is the proper designation that is a broader umbrella that is responsible for almost 90% of domestic terror. That's why I use that specific terminology. Far-right anti-government extremism is the terminology used by professionals in the Department of Homeland Security, by professionals in general that look at acts of terrorism, domestic terrorism. Why isn't he being labeled as a terrorist by the media? Does he have to be bearded and Arab? What did he achieve? Killing civilians in terror? Yes, this is an active stochastic terror, but because stochastic terror, specifically white supremacist or far-right stochastic terror, or a far-right guy snapping, okay? A far-right guy snapping and like going and doing a fucking random mass shooting is expected. Now, I want to explain something to you. Okay, I want to explain something to you. Like this, as far as I understand, is not like a hate crime that this person engaged in. He just went on a fucking murder spree. Okay? He happens to be a far-right freak who went on a murder spree. Okay? But it does seem like this is one of those instances where he just fucking snapped. Okay? So obviously, the snapping the snapping is more so a byproduct of not having adequate protective measures in place. Okay? Yeah, he was a paranoid schizophrenic who's also an alt-right extremist. Reading that shit is like gasoline for psychosis. True. Maine has massive gun and mental health issue with yellow flag laws. They are the highest suicide rate via firearm by wide margin, and he also killed more people than the total in 2021.
Peaceful rural community. He kind of described it as a big small town. Folks kind of know each other here, or they know of each other.
Lewiston is known for having a large immigrant population, especially Somali refugees. I wouldn't be surprised if this is part of why he went there. I live nearby. Some black activists on the ground have also apparently reported this guy before to law enforcement, saying that they were being harassed by him. Most sites like 4chan and the deep far-right Reddits actively have people trying to trigger schizophrenic people's delusions. I've literally seen them say it. Yeah.
Each other. And so you can only imagine just how quickly the news of this has spread and the devastation for the families of the victims.
Listen, I'm not willing to make this assessment yet, okay? This is nearby. His sister said he might have been targeting an ex based on location. I've been watching this. This broke yesterday. I'm not willing to make an assessment at this point, but I will show you what he believes in, okay? But I want to make sure that you understand. I'm not stating that this is like, this instance is absolutely like a hate crime. I don't think there's enough evidence yet on that matter. I think these are two separate things, okay? You only make assessments if Hamas says so, right? Dude, literally fucking the things I want to say to you, I think you know, okay? I think you know the things I want to say to you. I just can't fucking say it out loud, okay? Listen, take the IDF dick out of your fucking mouth. It's been lodged into your brain so fucking hard that it's stopping you. It's disrupting you from thinking clearly. Okay, it's almost been 10 days, okay? We're on the 10th day of the El Ahli hospital, and since then, thousands more Israel has bombed, and since then, the New York Times issued a report saying that everything that the Israeli officials and the American officials said about who was responsible for the bombing was a lie. Even some of my fucking biggest haters have at least had the decency to shut the fuck up about that and just like kind of hand wave it away, but you're still in here. Honestly, bro, I don't think there's a way to tell the idea of cog gobblers from the General Hassan haters because they all say the same shit. Yeah, I know, because the General Hassan haters do not have any political positions that they just go, oh, Hassan said it, so it must be wrong. I hate him. Like I said, thank you, Protasium. I agree with you. It's too indiscriminate to be a hate crime, at least thus far. We do not know. The X theory is probably the best motive I've heard so far. So this guy is crazy. Okay? It's crazy. He definitely, like, it seems like another moment of like someone quote unquote going postal rather than someone who is like deliberately and trying to do right-wing terrorism. Okay? He might be a right-wing psychopath on top of that, but it seems like his indiscriminate slaughter here is not directly associated with his right-wing values. He just seems incredibly mentally ill. Now, did right-wing radicalization probably feature or play a role in his like insanity? Probably, you know, certainly. But I don't think that it's the major responsible cause here.
So much pain. And yet this search is ongoing. So even as this community begins to deal with coming to terms with what happened, there is an active search underway. And we heard in that news conference just a short time ago that this individual, now a suspect, as you said, Robert Card, is considered armed and dangerous, not to be approached, obviously, at all. And so that, as you can only imagine, is only adding to the absolute level of fear and anxiety as this manhunt continues.
And so are people still being instructed to shelter in place? What are they hearing from police there?
So they are, but you'll see that every so often there are cars that are going by behind me here. That's because this is sort of a main artery, a lot of truck traffic, but a lot of vehicles have been going back and forth. However, if you kind of go just beyond this main road, you'd see that there really isn't anything open. And empty parking lots of businesses, empty parking lots of restaurants. It is the middle of the day, a time when you might expect to see businesses with their doors open, welcoming customers. That is not the case here in Lewiston right now. So there is a very palpable sense of fear and anxiety. As I said, some folks here saying, you know, they are still really, frankly, in disbelief that something like this could happen here.
And I'm just sort of looking quickly, Elaine, at the president's statement. And of course, the president says, once again, our nation is mourning after yet another senseless and tragic mass shooting. Today, Jill and I are praying for the Americans who have lost their lives, for those still in critical care, and for their families, survivors, and community members enduring shock and grief. He goes on further down in the statement to say, while we had made progress on gun safety through the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the 24 executive actions I've taken and the establishment of the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, it is simply not enough. And Elaine, it sort of brings me to the gun laws in Maine. And during the press briefing, a couple of reporters asked, how does somebody dealing with mental health issues get their hands on a gun? But the truth of the matter is, in Maine, in terms there's not a lot restricting you from getting your hands on a gun.
Yeah, that's right. And so you heard the officials say there, basically, they're looking at all those questions. And this is an issue that we should note is not unique to this community, right? How many times have we talked about these kinds of issues in other incidents? So it is certainly not something that is unique, something that, though, is always scrutinized in these kinds of situations. What are those laws surrounding firearms? What laws could have prevented this? It is certainly something that we always hear debated in, unfortunately, what has become an all too common event in this country.
Definitely. So, listen, Charles, let me pivot over to you because you know what police are going through right now. They are looking for this man, Robert Card. Initially, they had released information about him being a firearms instructor. It turns out that's not the case, but he is in the reserves. He's got an active military ID. And from the way he looks like he's holding.
What are you saying? I am willing, because yesterday 4 schizophrenic people were standing in the middle of the street in my hood. They stood there for 35 minutes, like something stopped them. Those people don't talk, as my brother told me. What are you saying right now, Chatter? Are you okay? I feel like people are losing their minds a little bit here. Like, what do you think? There's like a activation code that happened that hit every schizophrenic person in a fucking 100-mile radius or something? Like, what's going on?
The gun. It looks like he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, there's an obvious familiarity and comfort with weapon handling. You can tell that by the photo that's been released. What I can tell you is I expected to hear what we heard in the press conference. The state police are now very clearly identified as the lead agency, working with the Lewiston police and being augmented by federal agencies and other local police in the area. Updates on victims. Unfortunately, those that have been injured, some may continue to pass. So we'll expect continuous updates on that. And the fact that Mr. Card is now a identified suspect going from a person of interest now that the arrest warrant's been issued. What I can tell you, though, based on the fact that this is a rapid and ongoing investigation, there is information about the individual that they're just not going to want to release or that they don't know. And I think you heard that transparently during the press conference, that this is so rapidly evolving that they are conducting the investigation, not just in Maine, but across other states to get as much information on the background of this individual as possible. And finally, they will issue a BOLO, a be on the lookout, for any type of vehicle, mode of transport associated and available to this suspect.
Why won't you state your position on the current scandal between the University of Michigan and spying on signs? Come on, dog. Come on, dog. Just fucking chill out, dude. I don't give a fuck about college football, dude. Are you out of your mind? Jesus Christ, sports fans. Take a second off.
Right? They're going to cast as wide a net as they can. And make sure that local authorities have that information, technology is put in place, like license plate readers, to capture that in the event that he's on the run in a vehicle.
Yeah, you know, well, we point out that we had gotten some information yesterday. They had to issue a correction. So I'm sure moving forward, they want to be really careful about what they say about this investigation. But some of the details that they gave us yesterday that they sort of didn't want to really dive too much into during the press briefing was about his mental health status. That, according to police, there had been mental health issues, including hearing voices, and had possibly threatened to shoot up a military installation.
Someone in the chat also brought this up, but like schizophrenic people are infinitely more likely to be victims of violence rather than those who perpetrate violent acts. So that's an important distinction to make here, okay? The idea that like every schizophrenic person is scary and violent is most often portrayed in the media, and it's just like it's not how this works in the real world. Now, however, having said that, do I believe that if you're schizophrenic, you should not have access to a weapon? Absolutely. And it's not just schizophrenia either. If you have chronic depression, you should not have access to a weapon either. And that's not because I think that you're going to go out and do a mass shooting. That's because I think you're going to kill yourself. And as a matter of fact, many do. As part of the reason why America has such high suicide rates for men. Men oftentimes use guns as an easy method to commit suicide. So this is something to also consider. Gun violence is massive in the United States of America, and a big part of that gun violence is actually suicides by gun. So, you know, these are all things to understand. These are all things to consider. I am absolutely the most ableist motherfucker you've ever heard in your entire life. If you think that I think that you should have a gun, despite having like severe mental illnesses, you're out of your fucking mind. You must be out of your goddamn mind, okay? It's for your own good and your own safety, okay? Anyway, let's continue.
In southern Maine, what are some of the factors that influence the way this search will unfold?
Do you see it normal that no Twitch streamers dare to even say a word in the Palestinian cause? It's fucking humanity, for fuck's sake. People should chill with the ableist card. I can't own a gun due to anxiety in my country due to legal reasons. It's perfectly fine. Who gives a shit? Exactly. I mean, I think that my haters, over the course of the past decade of me both covering this and many other issues, have basically, conditioned me into being ready, be able to talk about stuff like this without legitimate fear, because like they can't really do anything to me that hasn't been done to me by others and is still being done to me for the crime of having a political position that they do not agree with. So that is the reality. That's why most people don't want to say anything, because they're fucking terrified.